At first, self-knowledge almost never feels dangerous. It begins quietly, as curiosity. A person starts to wonder why they react the way they do, why certain emotions appear without warning, why some patterns keep repeating even when life seems to move forward. At this stage, nothing feels threatening. There is no conflict, no rupture. Understanding yourself feels harmless, even helpful. It feels like observing something from a distance without the sense that anything needs to change. Long before psychology gave names to these experiences, human beings already understood something simple and unsettling. Perception changes the place from which life is lived. But that shift doesn't happen all at once. Over time, observation deepens, and when it does, clarity begins to appear. Clarity interferes. It interrupts patterns that once worked silently. It slows reactions that used to be immediate. It creates small pauses where there used to be only impulse. That's the moment self-knowledge stops being neutral, not because it reveals something negative, but because it changes the relationship with what is seen. Many people believe the discomfort comes from thinking too much, but that's rarely the real issue. Discomfort appears because what once operated unseen is now visible, and what is seen no longer functions in the same way. Old habits begin to lose their grip. Beliefs that once organized life begin to feel tight. Justifications that once worked stop convincing. Ancient cultures were cautious with clarity, not because awareness was dangerous, but because it demanded responsibility. Once something is seen clearly, there is no return to autopilot. There is adjustment or inner conflict. This is why, throughout history, clarity was never treated lightly. It doesn't obey, it shifts the ground. Thinking is not the problem. The problem is no longer being able to pretend you don't know. When everything runs on automatic, there is no decision. Life simply happens. But when awareness enters the scene, questions appear, quietly but insistently. Does this still make sense? Do I want to continue like this? Does this pattern still represent who I am? From that point on, staying becomes a choice, and every choice has a cost. Many people stop here, not because they are weak, but because they felt the weight of seeing clearly. The ancients called this a passage. Today we call it inner conflict, but the experience is the same. At a certain moment, something becomes undeniable. What once kept everything working no longer works in the same way, not because it is wrong, but because it has been outgrown. Emotional patterns that once protected now limit. Beliefs that once organized now constrain. Reactions that once solved problems now create new ones. At this stage, the person hasn't gotten worse. They have simply stopped operating on autopilot, and that has consequences. Control, whether internal or external, works best when it is invisible, when it feels natural, when it goes unquestioned. Self-knowledge exposes mechanisms. It reveals repetitions. It shows learned conditioning. When this happens, control loses efficiency, not necessarily because someone else is controlling, but because internal systems are being seen. Habits of thought, automatic ways of adapting, learned strategies to avoid discomfort. Once these mechanisms are noticed, the person no longer reacts in the same way. And that creates friction. It's common to hear that people who observe themselves too much complicate everything. That thinking too much gets in the way. That analysis doesn't help, but that interpretation is shallow. The problem isn't thinking. The problem is not being able to unsee. Once something is truly noticed, it can't be ignored again. And that creates tension because it demands choice. As long as life runs automatically, decisions don't feel necessary. Responses are ready before questions arise. But when awareness enters, questions become unavoidable. Do I keep going like this? Is this still aligned with me? Am I repeating this out of habit or choice? These questions don't rush, but they don't disappear either. This is the point where self-knowledge starts to feel like a problem. Not because it creates suffering, but because it creates responsibility. Observing your own mind doesn't force change, but it makes clear when change is needed. And not everyone is ready for that. Sometimes staying with what is familiar feels safer than crossing into the unknown, even when the familiar hurts. That's why many people stop halfway, not because they failed, but because they felt the weight of clarity. At this stage, the conflict is no longer external. It happens inside, between who the person has always been and who they are beginning to notice, between habit and awareness. This conflict is not a sign of error. It's a sign of transition, and transitions are rarely comfortable. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding is the belief that knowing yourself removes stability. In reality, self-knowledge doesn't take the ground away. It changes the axis on which the ground rests. Instead of external references, stability begins to come from within. This is more solid, but also more demanding, because it no longer allows hiding behind automatic patterns. Long before modern psychology, ancient traditions understood this as maturation. Not enlightenment, not perfection, but responsibility. Seeing clearly doesn't make life easier, it makes it honest. And honesty rearranges everything quietly. Perhaps self-knowledge was never the problem. Perhaps it only becomes uncomfortable when it starts to work, when it stops being curiosity and becomes clarity. So maybe the real question isn't, how far should I go in knowing myself? But something quieter. What changes when pretending not to know is no longer possible? Some call this a crisis. Others call it overthinking. But across time, cultures recognize the same moment. The point where life asks for presence, not repetition. This doesn't require urgency. It doesn't demand immediate answers. It asks for something simple and deeply difficult, not falling asleep again after waking up. This isn't an ending. It's the moment when the next step begins to take shape. And when that happens, the path doesn't close. It deepens.